Robin Harris is someone who needs no introduction either, because she's been our co-chair here in Florida, and she was the co-chair of the Green Party of the United States Black Caucus, and she is known as activist for the people, fighting for not merely Black Lives Mattering, but Black Power Mattering. And I'm just going to hand it over to her. She's one of my favorite people on earth. Robin, take it away.
Hello, thank you. Afternoon. So I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss any messages, because I take it that we're taking it to the top of the hour. What time are we breaking for lunch?
LeBeau, you got an answer on that?
1 p.m.
Okay, we're breaking for lunch. Okay, so I'll try to definitely stop before then. I don't want.
And we're looking at 10-minute Q&A. So we're looking for until around 12:45, 12:50.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we spent a lot of time this morning talking about legislation, and very, very good information. And so I'm going to kind of give some of my perspective of somewhat of a wrap up, and also talk about some bills that have been looming around here in Florida. And I think you'll find it all kind of ties in. So let me, for about a few minutes, I also been wearing a couple of different hats as it deals with legislation, and but it's it's all the same process. And so just kind of, I'm just going to do a little presentation here first, then I'll come back and talk about, this is only about 2 minutes of that. So let me see if I know what I'm doing. Okay. Are you guys seeing anything?
Yes, I can see Robin. It's got background music and everything.
Okay, so thank you for, I just kind of wanted to kind of show you how my journey past couple of months has been around legislation. And first, I'll start with the first caption you saw. We started off with telling her stories, and I felt it was necessary to kind of shape this whole journey about legislation, how it impacts Florida from a historical perspective. So I had two people from actually that run museums to come, and one being Pasha Baker, who's also ran for, sorry Pasha, forgot what her position was, but Black woman who also owns and operates a museum in Goldsboro, Florida, and also the other museum is in Mims, Florida. It's called the Steve Baker may be familiar with it because it's in Mims, Volusia County. It's the Harry and Harriet Moore Museum, and that's important in this time as in Florida as well as it was then. Harry and Harriet, their home was bombed in Mims, Florida, because of Harry's organizing around voting. He was very he was also was an educator. He was very robust. He was an excellent organizer, as I said, in voting um, to register many Black people during that time. And unfortunately, the Klan and other white residents bombed the home, and he and his wife died as a result. And that's important because of the voter suppression that we're still facing. We're talking late 1800s or so, 1900s, and we're still facing that type of pushback. So I thought that was important to share that for my journey. The next one was conversation with Senator Bracy. Senator Bracy revealed, and I don't have the numbers, proposing a bill called the Marijuana Expulsion Act, and what that would do would push back on mass incarceration, because so many Black and brown people are incarcerated for petty crimes such as that, but they're facing long sentences. So his Expulsion Marijuana Act, and the next bill was called the Ocoee Massacre Reparations Act. And what that would do would, it wasn't direct. I mean, I was a little like, because it's not a direct repair for Ocoee descendants, but it is a fund to create scholarships for Ocoee residents and students. So that was two bills that we talked about on that platform from Senator Randolph Bracy. The other conversation I had is, which I think is worth sharing, if I can find a way to bring that up, and I'm going to try to move quickly here. Do you guys, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. This was my next conversation was with. Okay, I don't know why I have all these ads, but my conversation was with Senator Park Cannon. Senator Park Cannon was a Black woman who was arrested in Georgia, and our conversation was great. And we talked about we did talk about State Bill 90 as far as I could talk about it, but what she was arrested for was in Georgia was Kemp signing of State Bill 202, which has these same restrictions. It was a package of bills restricting voting access. Same thing, no water. And so Park Cannon was a Black woman who knocked on the door of Brian Kemp while he was signing this bill, and she was handcuffed and taken to jail. And one of the officers had the audacity to say to her, "This reminds me of January the 6th. Are you kidding me?" One small Black woman that she gets aligned with that idiocy on January the 6th. So we talked about voter suppression in the South and how this. I mean, in the South is a whole different enigma than sometimes what folks face in the North without realizing it. But she was faced with that. All charges were dropped. By the time she was in conversation with me, all those charges were dropped, and we're grateful for that. And so the other conversation I had was about, excuse me, the Florida Legislative Black Caucus unveiled sweeping police reform package, and they did this as a response after George Floyd's murder. And I'm just going to highlight a few of these bills because it's quite a package. And how I feel about that is, maybe one thing. Now, I had this conversation with an attorney that's down in South Florida, Melba Pearson, who is one of the few attorneys that have no problem advocating against policing systems here in Florida. And so some of the bills that were unveiled, that some of the bills that were that were unveiled were HB 6057. This bill was by Representative Omari Harry. This is a proposed legislation to reform the Police Bill of Rights. Really necessary because we know that there's so many layers of legislation that are stacked against us as Black and brown people that officers hardly ever face any type of or anything. And so, and just a quick word about that, everyone was excited about Derek Chauvin, that whole situation of him being found guilty, blah, blah, blah. But that's not justice for one person. A simple, in my opinion, was a sacrifice. He was a good old boy to his people, and they were willing to make him a sacrifice. And so, because that same day, while that sentencing was taking place, Ma'Khia Bryant, she took 4 to the chest. And so these hashtags keep coming. So we have to have legislation, maybe that's like 6057 House bill, but we need strong legislation that will tear back these layers. So House Bill 6057 in this package. We also have House Bill 479 that was proposed by Ramon Alexander. And this bill is to compensate victims of excessive force by law enforcement. Now, where I find that to be, it's a nice touch. However, I've been telling folks for the past few months, we need a whole system overhaul because it's never cost them anything to kill Black people. They don't care. They'll pay it. So, but it's an effort. The next piece of legislation is House Bill 521, State Bill 868, no-knock search warrants. This was presented by Senator Bobby Powell and Rep. Christopher Benjamin. Now, this kind of comes on the heels of where it happens all the time, but the Breonna Taylor incident. So, other legislations are HB 569, State Bill 452, law enforcement body and dashboard cameras. I'm not a big fan of those because all they have to do is cut them off. And so they have brutalized Black people with cameras on or off. It may help for the evidence, but it's not going to doesn't deter anything. We also have House Bill 647, State Bill 942. These are to intervene policy requiring officers to disrupt excessive uses of force. So that's out there. Then we have House Bill 6035, use or threatened use of deadly force. This was presented by Representative Yvonne Henson. This is to essentially end stand your ground defenses in Florida. Here's another one, House Bill 187, law enforcement equipment. I'm thinking that they are alluding this to ending the 1033 program, or at least it should. There's also House Bill 187 that would prohibit the use of tear gas. Now, I shared this link because it's quite a package, but the unfortunate thing is, as Phil kind of told us, is that because of HB1 and preemption and all these little sneaky things that come down the pipe, the fair and just policing bills presented by the Black Caucus of the Florida legislature pretty much got overlooked, and they are just sitting there. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. And so if we want to get behind some of those bills, we could maybe add stronger language, but they simply didn't go anywhere this session. So, which brings us to what all eyes have been on here in Florida with HB1. And what I found to be disappointing by this was back in November, as myself and other activists, we actually gave an educational webinar when it was just kind of like a buzz. It wasn't, people weren't quite sure what was going on, but we gave an educational webinar trying to gain attention. And no one actually, no nonprofit, no organization actually responded until after the fact, around about February, after DeSantis had already signed and pushed it through on January the 6th. But my take on HB1 has been that it's the rhetoric that's in HB1. If you haven't read it, it's rhetoric from the past. It sounded so much like I think am I gonna have problems like Lizzie?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I think I got it. Okay, rhetoric from the past, and it's all part of the Southern strategy. Folks like Barry Goldwater, Richard Nixon, DeSantis is the godson of all of them, if you will. It's nothing more than a package of HB1. It's nothing more than a package of black codes that try to control black people. It's nothing more than Jim Crow laws being mandated again. Political and economic power that's why I always say, yes, Black lives matter, but they don't matter until we have black power. And this is all part of the plan to take our power back to restrict us. If you listen to the language again in HB1, it's a restoration of law and order. For example, back then it was a dog whistle signaling Nixon's support for an end to protests, marches, and boycotts, while they try to introduce a war on drugs, create all this fear. It's the same thing now. It's like, oh my God, these Black Lives Matter protesters, but who stormed the Capitol? It wasn't us, because they would have killed us dead. So again, we have to understand and listen to the semantics to know how to fight this back and organize against us. And DeSantis, in the face of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd being murdered, this to Black America was his response to put out HB1 and to file it. Not to mention that Florida's history has been horrible. I always thought that Florida may have been 3 or 4 because I'm from Texas. I thought we were number 1 for mobs. But between 1882 and 1930, African Americans were more likely to be lynched in Florida than any other southern state. For every 100,000 Black people in Florida, 80% were lynched. And so this bill is nothing more than a lynching okay. It's okay to lynch Black people for having a voice. So DeSantis, as you know, he's not well taken in the Black community. The Democrats, we can't rely on them. Keith Ellison, he sold us out. You can look this up if you like. Oh my God. Val Demings, who is now running for Marco Rubio, who is trash to the Palestinian community now because of her her silence on their issues. But she's also Miss Val Demings' Lives Matter bill. So it's up to the Greens to take a stand and to push back on legislation like this and all the other preemption laws. And that's why I would never take, because part of the problem is these guys, the unions are in their pocket. Ron DeSantis has received since 15 grand. I'm sure it's more because this is not updated. So that's my sharing. I had with 2 minutes to spare. So that's how it looked from my perspective. Legislation for me on this year. Well, this session.
Robin, thank you so much for that. And you hit on so many important points. Number one, the fact that a bill dies this year does not mean that it still is dead. Quite often, the bills that you see get passed were introduced many years before and have to drop back up. So with COVID pulling backwards, it's the time for us to push on these things that we know are going to be important. Also, Robin, showing you that little montage you did of the events you've been doing, it's very important to me that Greens understand that the people who represent you in Tallahassee are not smarter than you are, they're not more special than you are, they tend to be a little bit richer than you are, but other than that, they're normal people. And I believe the people in this room, we could probably replace random people in the legislature with people in this room and come out with better results.